everyone. This month's podcast, I have John Ngumi with me. I don't think he needs any introduction, and so I won't even try. We'll just go straight into it. John, welcome, and thank you so much for agreeing to be on my podcast. It's a real honor for us to have you here today.
Well, as I told you earlier, I've never listened to or done a podcast, and this is my first, so it's curious to.
And I'm honored that you've chosen for us to be the first one, so this is great. So, John, what we want to do really is get into your career, your long-standing career, the achievements that you've done and we've made, and basically understand you as a person, or try to, in the 45 minutes that we have. I want to start off with you and your education. You went to Oxford in the 1970s. I want to know, what was that like, first of all, and what was the application process? How did you get in? Oxford is still, probably the number one institution in the world for higher learning. So it's, you got it, you made it. How?
Mine was not a straightforward process.
Okay.
Let's say that I was a good student. I have to be careful how I describe myself after last week. I was a good...
After last week?
I was a good student.
Not the best student.
I was a good student. Did well in my O-levels. We had O-levels then.
Yeah.
And then swaned around for my A-levels.
What does swaned around mean?
It means that I didn't take all studies too seriously.
Okay.
And the end result was, shall we say, disappointing.
What was it?
So my father decided that I needed to do penance.
Penance.
Yes, penance.
Mm-hmm.
If you get Catholic.
I mean, it's a good word. It's a good word. Mm-hmm.
So he packed me off with a bunch of Jesuits at a college outside Oxford, which specialized in educating adults, not students, not just
Okay, good.
adults.
Mm-hmm.
And its purpose was to get emerging leaders from the then colonial countries, Rhodesia, Southwest Africa, Mozambique, whatever, plus a few of the other ones which have become independent, and train them to go back as robust Catholic leaders, something like that.
So when you say Jesuit, it was actually a Catholic. Okay, all right. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I was, by some very many years, the youngest person there.
Okay.
Which was an interesting experience to talk to people, to live with people who had just been freedom fighters.
Okay. In their own countries.
In their own countries.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or had run away into exile. Stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was a 2-year program. I still have it. And I did reasonably well at the end of it. And the university came calling, because it was just outside Oxford. So they asked me on college calls, and Peters asked me whether I'd like to go to them. And one inducement they put my way was, because of how I'd done this particular earlier exam, we to skip the first years, right?
Oh, wow. So it was really catching up from the mess up of the A-levels to being a second-year university student. Okay, wow, okay, fine. That doesn't happen, I'm sure it doesn't happen these days, like quite the same way. You did PPE and you got a first. What was it arduous? Was it tough? Did you feel, the lone person in the group? Were there a lot of Black people? There couldn't have been a lot of Black people there, or even Africans.
My college, Oxford is a federation of colleges. My college was called St. Peter's. There were only 2 Blacks, 2 non-whites.
Yeah.
One was a British Black, and me.
Yeah.
I hardly knew him. But it was a good college. And in those days, we were still enough of a rare species to be treated with warm receptions.
I mean, that's good.
So it was we were a rare species.
Yeah.
We were an exotic, so to speak. Treated well.
Okay.
So I never really felt out of place.
Wow. So we could get the best and we get the PPE degree. And then I read that you joined NatWest, National Westminster Bank, because they wanted a Kenyan to work in their banking system, correct?
The correct story is that NatWest in 79 had arranged a $100 million syndicated loan for Kenya.
For Kenya?
For the Republic of Kenya.
Okay.
Funny enough, by the way, the next one that was LRE was one I did in 2012.
Oh, cool.
Anyway, so they had offered to train a Kenyan in international finance. The National Treasury had nobody like then. And my father happened to know somebody, and I jumped at the opportunity. So I went to NatWest.
And what was that experience like?
Again, we were a rare species in the London financial district. It's called the city. And we were rare enough for us to be treated with the necessary courtesy and respect and interest. So it was a pretty tough training, because I remember my first 2 months was spent mostly filing and photocopying, which, as you can imagine, may sound demeaning, but actually was a fantastic way of learning the business, learning the clients. I worked for a manager who was responsible for 100 of NatWest's global consumer goods company. So you did a lot here. You talked to people in Europe or the branches. You talk to people in the branches in England or in the UK. So you work basically as a as an associate in your profession. You're basically an associate, and you're really pushed very, very hard. I did. I've done interesting things. I've spent time with the head messenger of the bank, because in those days you took checks and certificate of deposit and bonds around physically. So I've spent time with him going around the city, and I learned the power of messengers, the messenger network. I spent time a week at the Queen's Bank, which was owned by NatWest. That's right. Yep. I had to trade there for a week or two. Spent time at the merchant bank. So it was interesting. I learned a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I worked in London, so I understand, starting from the bottom and really getting to know your profession, really. So what did it teach you about yourself working in London? Was it a time of introspection, or was it a time of just, let me just get the job done?
I think you must remember, and I know I'm not alone in this, I drifted into banking. I liked the job, but it was never a calling at that time, or a passion. It was learn how to work. And to me, London was a natural extension of Oxford. So there was no real break and no real difference.
Why did you decide to come back then?
I had a 3-year program, and when you've been, how can one put it, which won't offend your listeners?
You can offend the listeners, it's fine. Get them on side, John.
When you've been ultra privileged, you then also should have a sense of duty.
Okay.
And that is why I came back. I could have stayed in England. I like England. I go there a lot. But I felt that it was time to come and see what Kenya was like. This was now India, and it is try and work in Kenya.
So what did you do first when you came back?
What I did first, I had written to the chairman of Greenless Bank, as it was called then, because it was the only merchant bank I knew in Nairobi. And I told him I was coming back, and they said, they looked me up. They come up, and when I came back, it so happened that the day I went to see him, they had a resignation. So I got a job. Okay.
So you started working at Greenlee's, steadily working up the path, I guess, into now starting your own investment bank, Loiter. What were the kind of deals that you were doing at the time? What was the most interesting thing that you were, captivated by, and hopes that you had for business in Kenya?
The Green was a combined corporate bank and merchant bank. We had a lot of farmers, we had quite a few deals in government. I came in the middle of our financing the Canberra Dam. We did a lot of export credit there for the Canberra Dam. So I was basically a wingman supporting my then boss. The only one where I really took the lead, and I'm really proud of it, was I think it is in '84, where I think I was challenged to try and get financing in London for Kenya coffee farmers because of the lack of financing in Kenya. And we did. We arranged a $34 million deal, a revolving deal which allowed coffee farmers to get payment at parchment stage long before they sell. And it worked very well. I left Grinders soon after that, but it continued for a few years. And I know that I am confident that it played a role in the fact that we had some very, very good coffee harvests and exports at that time. So I liked that because it was really the first time I'd done any banking which went down to the grassroots.
And really demonstrating value for the coffee farmers, right? So did you leave Grinders and start Loiter immediately?
No. I was... Banking is a small community, as your community is like. So the then number 2 at Citibank had seen or heard of what I was doing. So he invited me to a round of interviews, including one with, believe it or not, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who was then based in Liberia. Who was then a regional head of something, I think HR.
Okay.
In Nairobi, we were based at Cott's house.
Oh, wow.
She was the one to give the final say when I'm hired or not. So I have the privilege of having been
interviewed by a president.
By
a future president, but also not your only president. So let's continue on that road. Okay, fine. So you joined Citibank. What were the kind of deals that you were doing at Citibank, and can you give us highlights from that time?
Citibank was a clear corporate bank. We had very many large local corporates and international companies. I was quickly put in charge very soon after I joined. Put in charge of the oil and gas and I think oil and gas and construction, and quite a few of those large sectors. Worked with a very good team. Liabilities, part of our team included people like Andrew Cairo, who's just about to leave or has left as chairman of Kenya Commercial Bank. So that was part of the team. And the one transaction that stands out was when in '89, Kenya, we were going through our challenges, budgetary and foreign currency, in servicing our debt. And we weren't the only country. So the US had put together a program to refinance debt, take on this debt, put it all together in a bond. Government would, US government would guarantee that 90%. Country had to come up with 10%, then list the bond in New York. So, but that was by competitive tender. So I led the tender process with a colleague in London, and we won it against people like Bear Stearns and Morgan Stanley and Weber. And that deal remains the only bond ever issued by the government of Kenya or any other Kenyan entity on the New York Stock Exchange.
I mean, wow. Okay. All right. But greater achievements to come. So Citibank, is that when you then decided to leave to go to Loiter? Oh, that's continue then.
No. One gets an itch, and I got an itch and saying, let me go out there to the big wide world and see what it's like. So I went out to do business like any other Kenyan. I lasted about 9 months because it was...
What kind of business?
Everything, wines and spirits, sugar, buildings, everything.
So you were actually like a salesman, like a businessman?
Yes, I was.
And, okay, that's completely different from what you were doing.
Yes, but it's good to try this one.
Okay. So what were the pitfalls? I mean, aside from the obvious ones.
No, it you need a certain mentality, you need a certain staying power, you need a certain ruthlessness, especially the kinds of deals we were trying to do, which was against some pretty well-connected people.
Yeah.
So after 9 months, I gladly had a drink with the then general manager of Barclays Bank of Kenya, Fred Bureau, a drink that had been arranged in a very surreptitious way by a very good friend of mine. He passed away very soon after, called Raymond Omorioki.
My cousin.
Yeah, so we had a drink, and Fred said, "Look, you need to come back to us. So come to Barclays." So I went to Barclays.
Okay.
Where I went in the merchant bank. It was called Barclays Merchant Finance, and worked in that. Did all these very iconic deals, I would say: Longrow House, Unga House, Windsor, Rubber Shopping, Nation Center. All those were transactions done using an instrument called a debenture stock issue. Then I was being given an all-round training, so I went to work in a branch, the Queensway House branch as the number 2. Queensway House was then the largest branch of Barclays in Africa by far.
Oh wow! Okay.
I thought it was interesting. I remember, meet all manner of people, whether it's politicians, business people, civil servants, or people working in salary jobs.
Yeah.
It was a it was a very large branch with the clients across the entire spectrum. I think the one thing I remember from then was the very high interest rate environment in 1992-3, and how we really worked bend over backwards in the branch to make sure that we restructured our clients' loans. And I'm proud to say I don't recall any single client being put into receivership or any of those bankruptcy proceedings at that time. Then I went back after being admitted into the, call it the elite. Barclays had something called career development program where the top 100 people in the world were put in. So I was admitted that and went back to the merchant bank, and then reunited with my friends from before, and we decided, let's form our own investment bank. That's right.
That was okay. So then we get to that was brave.
That's right.
What gave you the confidence to know this Loiter, it'll be successful? We'll do it.
I think that if you don't have the confidence, you should not be an investment banker at all.
Very true. Okay.
So we knew what could.
Yeah.
Because the original founders were Zambian, Palestinian, and American, a Ghanaian, myself, and then we were later joined by 2 ladies. Those remember we were joined by 2 ladies. One you know well, one you call Ghana and Jed Briggs. And we did an incredible thing. We very soon after we teamed up with S.G. Warburg. One of our colleagues, the Ghanaian, had worked with Warburg. So we teamed up with Warburg as an associate. And our first real ballsy deal was to try and buy Standard Chartered Investment Services. We didn't, but they were winding down that business. So we successfully bid to manage the pension funds of 3 large entities: Standard Chartered, BAT, and Tower Kenya.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So right from the get-go, within 6 months, we already were managing just under 4 billion in assets. And in that period, we managed it through a company called Loiter Asset Management. In that period, we set out the rudiments of asset management, which are used to this day.
To this day, yeah. What are the tenets of that asset management business? What were your principles in terms of where the money was going to go? Whether it was
what we did, in fact, because there had only been 2 asset management companies of note till then: Barclays Trust and Standard Chartered.
Yeah.
What we did was to bring forms and practices and disciplines out of London. So we put out a weekly newsletter. We did plenty of research.
Yeah.
We analyzed why invest in this company or that company. We reached out a lot to other pension funds. We also stretched our hand offshore, so we brought the first portfolio investor into Kenya following the lifting of exchange and interest rate controls into the stock market. We raised money, ours and other people's, to fund the first venture capital here in Kenya called Acacia, which was part of a CDC. There's plenty. We went out and did a few deals here and there.
I mean, a few deals. Yeah, just a few. I want to know, when you were doing this, doing all the research, encouraging investment really into Kenya, and encouraging foreign investment in venture capital especially, what were the things, the anchors that you were trying to get from, or the confidence that you were trying to get from potential investors? What were the differences between then and now, for example?
Look, we were on the cusp of something. South Africa had just gone through its transition to black rule.
Yeah.
In fact, we did the first black empowerment deal in South Africa.
Wow.
Out of Nairobi. There was a buzz around Africa, though notwithstanding the tragedy in Rwanda at around this.
So it was around the same
94, 95.
Yeah.
So there was a buzz, there was a inkling that Africa is going places.
Yeah.
There was an optimism about the continent. We felt very strongly that this optimism needed to be tapped by indigenous Africans. That's why we set up the Loiter. So that is what was driving us to become the SG Warburg or the JP Morgan of the place.
I mean, who doesn't want that still to this day? But in terms of your then and now, what differences do you see about how the business is done, what people consider Africa to be like? Is there still that hope, do you think? Or do you think people are largely...
Look, I think Africa is a better known quantity.
Yeah.
You've got far bigger players. You've got far more structured ways of approaching this. We were seriously entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
So we ate what we killed. We spent like, drunken billionaires, but then went out and made money and paid up and went back to doing what we were doing. We lived large. We were basically emulating the city.
In London
that those of us had seen and worked in. But the underlying impetus had not changed. And if you ask the difference between then and now, I would like to think that there was call it an ideological drive behind what we were doing.
Yeah.
We were children of the 60s and 70s. You remember the Angela Davis and
the radicals,
the Black and Proud.
Yeah. That
is what was driving us.
Yeah. So for now, what do you think people need to do that's different? I mean, obviously, we still have the element of, an unknown quantity or even the risk that's associated with investing in Kenya and in Africa in general. What do you think people need to do differently now in order to make sure that investors come in?
I don't think they need to do anything differently. If you look at what James Mwangi has done, he's as confident as to try and build a Kenyan, regional, African, and eventually, I hope, a global bank.
Global bank, yeah.
That sort of thinking is what I'm glad it's happening. I'm glad when I see young Africans setting up VCs or PEs or whatever here. I'm glad when they actually want to do big things. So I think that mine is to say that we were pioneers in a very rudimentary way. I am proud and very happy to see what is happening today.
I mean, also there's a balance to be struck between foreigners coming into the country themselves and making it they want to build an African brand or Kenyan brand, as opposed to homegrown entrepreneurs doing it.
Where did you draw the line? All these homegrown have exposure in one form or another offshore. Capital is global. I think trying to draw a wall around capital here as opposed to capital offshore will just be a non-starter. Yes, I see the point, and I know that I saw the I think it was the Venture Capital Association or something like that bemoaning the fact that, for example, all the cash into tech startups was going into young Californians and young whatever.
Yeah.
And that if you go to, but then if you look at what, for example, Joysan Wadena is doing in terms of her tech, her digital and tech focused VC, it can be done. I think what we had and what perhaps more should have now is the courage to go out there. And I know that there's, have a young family, you take a risk, capital is a problem, but hopefully they will plunge ahead.
I mean, that's what we want. We want to see, Kenyans doing it. I mean, we represent all manner of clients, but we really want to see Kenyans doing it for themselves and being able to demonstrate that Kenya is a good market to be in. You believe in Kenya. You've believed in Kenya for several decades. What do you think the best thing about Kenya is in terms of the investing environment?
People. Do not underestimate the advantage we have of two national languages, so to speak.
Yeah.
Swahili and English. Pretty well spoken all around. That reduces the friction in trade and commerce and interaction like you do not know. One.
Yeah.
Two, the founding fathers and especially, in fact, the first and second administrations, President Kenyatta and President Moi, Jomo Kenyatta and President Moi, really put a premium on education.
Yeah.
So I remember giving a talk at Harvard Business School, the Africa Business Summit they have every year. And I remember being startled by a statistic that Kenyans, this is now 2008 or thereabout, that Kenyans formed the second largest population of Africans in education in the US and the largest in tertiary education. That cohort and the ones in Malaysia, in Australia, and Canada, or whatever.
The UK as well.
The UK, that's powerful. That's very powerful. And the first two administrations deserve all that credit. So there's a human element to Kenya, a human resource element to Kenya that is incredible. Third is location. We are at the western end.
Yeah.
With Mombasa Port and other places, we are the gateway to Africa. We've got, by regional standards, good logistics. Therefore, it makes a lot of sense for me as an industrialist to be based here, either to serve the Kenyan market or to serve the wider market. And if you think of East Africa, most of Africa, the population is on the coastline. Think about it.
Yeah.
East Africa is the only place where the population is into the hinter. So you actually have an entry into a vast population from here to the Atlantic.
Okay.
Of 300-400 million people.
Okay.
And with Kenya being the base. So Kenya is a natural location. And finally, our politics may sound like, death, struggles to the death every day, but actually going by standards in our region. If you're now, for instance, looking at what's happening in the Sudan, where best do you monitor it from? Nairobi. So it's that story is a good story. That political story, despite the political issues we always have, is a good story. So we almost like a gyroscope, just going, but still remaining stable.
Yeah. And so what changes do you think still need to be made from a regulatory standpoint, from an investor-friendly standpoint, in order to make Kenya really, pop? Do you think there needs to be more changes made? Any changes made?
I think there are two broad things. One is that we need to be less insular. the world is quite small, and people have choices in terms of where they deploy their capital.
Yeah.
So we need to be conscious of this. We need to be conscious that we need to attract capital against some pretty strong competition. Mm-hmm. And the second allied to that is, capital is a great coward. And therefore you want predictability, you want stability in terms of regulations.
Yeah.
We can do it, but to me, those are the two big ones.
Okay. All right. And so when you look at your career and what you've achieved so far, there is, and when I was doing the research, there is a lot of synergy between you doing a transaction and then you going to work for the entity for which you then did the transaction. So for example, you worked on a Kenya Pipeline deal, you then became the chair of Kenya Pipeline, you did a Safaricom deal, then you then became the chair of Safaricom. Why go into the business as opposed to continue to do the transactions yourself?
In the US, they have a concept called revolving door.
The revolving door, yeah.
In Kenya, I think we don't have the luxury of rigid segregation. I think that more and more people getting out of their comfort zones and going to do other things is beneficial to Kenya. And I've done that. I told you, I've been a wine spirits guy. I've tried to do a sugar deal. So it's almost like living my belief that you need dexterity and you need the flexibility and agility to be able to use a modern phrase, to have a 360 degree
okay.
of things. But those were not deliberate. Mm-hmm. I think what tends to happen is that if you do something well, then the people who either are there or they will say, why don't we take in from that side of the fence to our side of the fence?
Okay. And so from that perspective, first of all, what is it like getting a call to become the chair of Safaricom? Just from a human perspective.
One, all of them have been unexpected, other than in the private sector where I've run for election at KMT or whatever. The others have been unexpected, mm-hmm. And it's been almost like stop talking about how bloody awful or how difficult or how whatever it is managing public corporations is. Get in here and show us, or put up or shut up. So it's been that sort of that's the context in which I've seen all these things. None of them have been comfortable. I would definitely have preferred the life of a typical London merchant banker, exerting power and completely unknown. That would have been my preference. I have become as exposed as one can be, including being classed as a politically exposed person. So you enhanced
security
checks on whether you want to run an account or you want to run this or that. Yeah. But in the end, look, I always think back to the 1950s. My grandfather, my paternal grandfather, was an Ali Mau Mau detainee and stayed in there a long time. And I always ask myself, what would have been? Would I have put up my hand and actually done what he did, or would I have played it safe? I like to think that putting your head in the noose and risking it being chopped, which I've been doing pretty much for the last 8 years, is my own moment of time of truth. Who are you?
Who are you? Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, very good question. Do you know the answer now?
Do I know who I am?
Yeah.
Reasonably well, yes.
And happy with the person that you've become or have been?
I think I'm not very different from what what I thought I would be. I remember two of the books that I read with immense interest. One I read at around age 14. It was a 3-volume tome about the First World War by Winston Churchill. It was called The Great War. But they had all these larger-than-life characters, kings, generals, politicians, and what have you, what they did and what they dared. And then the other one I read 3 years later was by an American author called David Halberstam, and it was entitled The Best and the Brightest. It examined the history of U.S. involvement in Vietnam right from the end of the Second World War through to the near end of the Vietnam War. That was a two-decade love-hate affair. And in there you see people, you wonder what motivated them, why did they do what they did, were they destined for leadership? Some fell, some disappeared, some in disgrace, some as heroes. I like to think I haven't ended up too far from that sort of person.
Actually, the other thing that when I was reading about you, I read as well the analogies on Winston Churchill, the analogies on Roman generals and how success is fleeting. Then now you've given us another analogy
all
of the
glory is fleeting.
All glory is fleeting. The analogy now on the US. Why weren't you interested in politics?
A couple of reasons. I grew up in a home where I saw my father was a politician, but was very much an actor in the state, and I saw them, and I'm not sure I had the fortitude to maintain certain stances or to do certain things and what have you. Secondly, it was a very basic one, in that politicians are very eloquent.
You're not going to tell me that you don't think that you're eloquent, John.
No, I have been a stammerer all my life. And for me, even to do this interview is tough. I have to think before I speak. There's a story I give to audiences. When I was in high school, we used to be asked to stand up and read a page or two in English literature classes. And I was always picked on to read. And when you stammer, today, consonants or sibilants or some letters will be impossible.
Yeah.
So by virtue of necessity, I had to learn to speed read and get alternate words, so that by the time I'm reading, I've already decided today that word I'll replace with another word. And in 4 years of Form 1 to Form 4, I don't recall anybody ever calling me out on that.
Wow.
But that's the care you have to exercise. That you have to think. You have to. So the eloquence, the charm, the easy repartee of a politician. When you're like me and you cannot do something a 5-year-old child can do without effort, I think politics is.
But everyone has a disability or some sort. I mean, everyone has their thing, right?
I prefer to keep
viewers. I like that answer, John. Very good answer. Okay. So, given all of this experience, you've been an entrepreneur, you've been an employee, you've been a leader. We need to get first of all tips from you.
On what?
Number one, is it better to be an employee or is it better to be an entrepreneur? Is it better to go out on your own?
The good book of Ecclesiastes says.
Ecclesiastes.
Yes, says there's a time and a place for everything.
Yeah.
I think you are asking for a question that is a function of time. Mm-hmm. Today, I would make a terrible employee. Mm-hmm. If you asked me to go and manage a bank, I could not. 20 years ago, I would have loved it.
Yeah.
So There's a season.
And in terms of leadership then, because you've been on so many boards, you've been the chair of boards, you've been, a leader, and you've managed transactions, what do you think are the key skills that you need or require in order, first of all, to manage people, and second of all, to lead, successfully?
2 key skills, and bankers are terrible at one of them. Learn how to listen. It's amazing how much is said or left unsaid or expressed by gesture, by non-verbal means. Learn how to listen, learn how to read people, learn how to check your ego.
I mean, that's a difficult skill for bankers, I think.
At the door, learn how to tease out from the quiet ones. Number 2, especially in a country like ours where we are trying to do a lot of things, be prepared to be stoned, to be crucified, to have noises reach extreme decibel levels, to be pointed fingers at, to be ostracized almost. You have to be ready. It's not something that they teach you in college. They don't teach you certainly in the banks and places that I've worked in there. Especially if you're a banker, you're usually the power wielder. So that sort of thing doesn't come to you. People will come bowing, scraping to you because they need your service, your money, or the bank's money, or whatever. But the ability to withstand the most extreme, unfair, crude, ridiculous, cruel attacks, it's something that you must have today.
And then if you're facing a challenge or a failure, or, if you've ever made a mistake, which I'm sure all of us have, and I'm sure you have.
Made many.
How do you deal with that? What is the best way to cope?
I used to mourn over them and really beat myself up. And if I'd been an Opus Dei type, I would have had a hair shot and was sleeping it and killing myself every day or something. But in the end, as a very wise man told me when I joined NatWest, something I forgot, but which many years later came back to me. Whatever you do, the sun will rise tomorrow and set. So learn how to put it aside for a bit. Remember, when faced with powerful men, and me, I'm talking about men, that all men put on their trousers the same way. So don't be intimidated. Remember that we're all human. And even the man who is looking very domineering and fierce at you also has his own insecurities and failures and deep, dark fears.
Mm-hmm. And so when you're facing the firing squad, for example, in Parliament or whatever, what are you reaching for? Are you reaching for your own inner confidence? Are you reaching for your experience? What do you cling on to in order to face that barrage?
You've been called, asked to answer questions.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing you cling to is to say, I will answer the question. No matter how unpleasant the question is, or no matter how unwelcome my answer will be, I will answer the question. Secondly, these are leaders. These are people who've been elected by Kenyans. There are qualities that Kenyans saw in them. There's a reason they're here, and therefore treat each question or each questioner as somebody to whom you do need to pay attention and respect. Now, humans are humans. People come and ask you questions with different motives, but if you are very clear about what you did and how you did it and why you did it, then you should be able to the slings and arrows will come, but you should be able to
withstand. What are your tips for working well? I know when you came in, you said that you were up at 2:00 in the morning. I'm not hoping to be up at 2:00 in the morning when I reach your age, if I do. What are the tips for, making sure that you work efficiently and well? What have you learned over the years?
I'm sorry, you are the wrong person to ask. I am not an efficient worker.
Are you not?
Administration and allied skills are things that one left out of my DNA. So that I will struggle with.
Okay, fair enough. For young people who are listening to you, what is the one key piece of advice that you want to impart to them? A sound bite, something that you've learned over the years, something that they can take with them.
I've already said it.
You've said many.
One or two.
Yeah.
The sun will shine tomorrow, whether you frown or cry or do whatever it is the world. The second one, which I've learned a lot, is that you may think the whole world cares about your problems. Everybody cares about their own problems, and yours are the least of their problems. And therefore, the only way they'll care about your problems is if in some way you connect your problems to their well-being or to their problems. Third is the old saying, I forget which Romans say that, to thy own self be true. Ultimately, you have to look at yourself in the mirror. And you have to remember that we will either bury or tie your ashes or do whatever it is we'll do, you'll be on your own. So ultimately it's you, and your time is fleeting, use it well. Do you want to be a mouse, or do you want to roar a bit and be hard and be seen what you want to accomplish? And to you, again, to quote, I think it was Desiderata, there'd always be somebody taller.
I love Desiderata.
Taller, handsomer, richer, cleverer, there'll always be. So be happy with who you are. Okay. Life's unfair.
I mean, you've been a brilliant guest, John, really brilliant, and you've given us so many sound bites, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We normally do a quick fire round. Yeah. This is just questions you're supposed to answer without even giving it a moment's thought. Mm-hmm. You're not supposed to have read the question, so I don't know if you have one.
I told you I stammer, so I have to think what words to use.
Even if you stammer, we won't know. Beach or city holiday?
Beach.
Favorite place to visit?
Mount Kenya.
Apple or orange?
Orange.
Flat or sparkling?
Sparkling.
You get to listen to one song for the rest of your life. What is it?
What's that thing by, what's that song by Whitney Houston?
Which one?
The Greatest Love of All.
Oh, that's sweet. That's unexpected or sweet. Okay, I don't know if you like pizza, but most people do. Pizza topping of choice.
Cheese.
The simple thing. Okay, favorite drink?
I have 4.
Okay, go.
Light lager, cognac.
Which cognac?
Any cognac, as long as it's a VSOP, or a Remy or Courvoisier or whatever.
Okay.
Champagne and single malt.
Which champagne?
Paul Roger.
And which single malt?
Macallan.
Spoken like a true London banker. Thank you so much, John. You've been brilliant. This is going to be such a good podcast for anyone. Anyone who's been in investment banking, anyone who's known about your career, known you. You've just been brilliant. Thank you so much.
Asante.
See you all next one, guys.